Alright, so we're back here. We're gonna be doing some welding today. I'm gonna be testing some welds today. I'm not making any projects. Well, I am, just not on the video. I was building a lot of trailer ramps today. And I needed a break from that, so I'm gonna figure some stuff out here. So there's this other guy on YouTube with the channel name of Making Mistakes with Greg, and a while ago he was trying to run some 035 dual shield, and he was finding that there's really no penetration when he was running it. So I have some different wires here. I'm not running all these on the video, but I got like 030 solid wire, 035 solid wire. That's what I normally use to build these ramps. I got some 045 dual shield, and then in the machine I have some 035 dual shield. A lot of his viewers were saying, you know, the Blue Demon was crap, he needs to run this Lincoln Electric wire. So I actually have a roll of that Lincoln Electric 035 outer shield 71M. So I'm going to put that to use today. I had to run off. So with these wires, if you let them sit around a while, like the first layer or two kind of holds moisture, so you get a lot of worm tracking. So a few days ago I ran all that out. This is my practice plate here. So you see there's no worm tracks in those welds. There was a whole bunch on this side over here, but I worked it all out. So there's no moisture in the wire anymore, at least not enough to affect what I'm doing. And I don't have any 1/4 inch plate, but I do have some 3/8. And then I think this is just 1/8 inch, something close to it. We're going to test that out on the 035 and the 045 dual shield wires today. And we're going to cut them apart and see what all is going on inside of them, and then try to break the rest of the samples. So the first up, we got 035 dual shield Lincoln Electric 71M wire. We're hooked up to this furnace. We're running synergic mode. It seems to do pretty good. When you set this, you can set the material thickness, and it's not letting me get above 1/4 inch. So we're running at max specs for the synergic mode with this wire. You can see there we're at rutile 71T 035 7525. That's what we're running here. I got a bit frosty because I was building ramps and it's cold out, but it should still work. We're at 620 inches a minute, and then 28.6 volts is what this thing has it set at. And yeah, let's see what happens here. I won't be able to get you any arc shots, but you can see the colored footage of me welding here. Okay, so this is our test sample here. 3/8 plate, maybe about 4 inches wide. Normally I would suggest wearing a papper system or getting a fume extractor, but I'm not welding a whole lot. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to be trying to run straight in or with a slight drag angle with this stuff. I'm going to try to keep my stick out around 3/4 of an inch stick out. So let's go. I'm welding right over the mill scale too on this. Alright, so I had 3 seconds of post flow there. I'll let that cool down a bit, and then we'll chip the slag. This is the 1/8 inch sample. I'm going to change the machine settings. I am going to use the synergic thing here. So we're at 125 for the material thickness. It's telling us it wants us to run 360 inches a minute and 24.4 volts. So let's see what happens. Alright, so the 035 samples are done. Let's chip the slag here. Looks like I did get a little bit of worm tracking on that one. Not terrible, but there is some worm tracks. I've noticed that when I turn the welder up as high as I am, I only seem to get worm tracks with this wire in this machine combination. I don't know if it's because the machine cannot sustain the amount of voltage or amperage, but it does seem to worm track a lot when I run that high. I didn't get any worm tracks on this 1/8 inch stuff. Yeah, it seemed to work pretty good. So I'll set them off to the side, and then I'll set up for 045. Alright, so I got the 045 wire fed into this machine. The synergic mode, it doesn't want to go above 300 inches a minute, and it's at 25.2 volts. So I only cut off about 1 foot of this wire after it came out of the tip. I'm going to weld on this piece of scrap metal here to show you what I'm talking about with the worm tracks. I haven't used this wire in probably about a year, so I can almost guarantee you it's going to worm track. See that? It seemed like it ran really nice, but right there, I mean, it's got huge worm tracks. Like huge worm tracks. I'll run another one. It definitely seemed like it was biting into the metal, as some people call it, but the worm tracking is horrible. Look at that, it's probably about I'd say at least an 1/8 inch hole right in the center of the weld. So in order to fix that, the only thing you can do is pretty much weld on scrap metal or just run out a bunch of wire. So hopefully your machine has a cold run out. Because I'm going to have to do that. Just waste a bunch of wire. Alright, so I probably lost a good chunk of wire there. And then I ran 2 more sample welds. I'll weld another one to make sure we're actually in the good wire. Alright, so the worm tracking is pretty much gone away there. So I think we're good to go on our test here. So let's get our 045 test samples here. I'm just running this. We're set at the maximum synergic settings. I'm going to check the amperage here. The last time I welded with this on that plate there on the scrap metal, it was burning around 192 amps. So that's about all this machine can really handle. Yeah, so let's see what happens here. .045 on 3/8 plate. Set that off to the side, and then we'll get our 1/8 inch sample here, and I'll lower the machine settings. So in synergic mode, it has me burning 180 inches a minute and 22.5 volts. So I've never dual shielded on material this thin with this wire, so find out if it'll just blow a hole or not. This is on the very, very low end of this wire, I think. It is not running good at all. It needs to get turned up some. Yeah, that it didn't blow through, but like you can feel it just. That's on the very cold end of that wire. I think any lower than that, it's probably not going to run right. So I didn't have any worm tracking really on the 045 on the 3/8 plate. That looks pretty good. Now let's see about this 1/8 inch stuff. Well, that doesn't look too bad. We'll cut it apart and find out. Alright, so before I cut them apart, I mean, that's what we're left with. It definitely heated up the 1/8 inch a lot. You can see all that blue in there. That's a big heat affected zone. Alright, so that's the 035. Again, that's some worm tracking on that one. That's the 045. It actually did run pretty nice on that. And 045 over here. Definitely overheated the plate. Yeah. I'll get them cut apart and see what we got. Alright, so I got done cutting all these samples apart. I thought I had some navel jelly around here to kind of bring out the welds. You know, let you see what all is going on a little bit better. But I cannot find it. But you don't really need the navel jelly to see these defects here. So this is 035 right here. Again, I don't have the navel jelly, but there's a big slag pocket trapped down here at the root. So there's no root penetration at all. Just a giant slag pocket. This is the same stuff I was getting when I was running self-shielded wire as well. So, yeah. Even on the thinner stuff, you still see that. It's very, very interesting. Like it trapped a little bit of slag there at the very bottom. Trying to get the camera to focus on it. There we go. Yeah, right there. Yeah, right there at the very bottom of the weld, right in the root. You can see there's some slag trapped in there. Again, this is all the 035 samples. But even in the 045, it's even more noticeable on this. I think this one might be okay. Yeah, definitely not really what I was expecting to see. So, I don't know. I'm gonna put you guys on the tripod here, and we're gonna give it an impact stress test. See what happens. Changing my setup here. It's getting pretty tough there. All right, we'll resume this test. All right, so even with that slag pocket in the root, it's still holding. I can't rake it free with my fingers. I mean, I gotta wiggle it a bunch, but the plate is all touching the table. There we go, that finally broke. This one's going to be a lot harder, I'm assuming, because this is bending the face. Alright, so that one's not breaking really. I'm sure if I had something more powerful than just this little hammer, I could get it to break. But I'm going through a lot of effort on that one. Alright, now we'll try that with the 045 and see what happens there. That one's still holding. And now for this one. Oh, finally. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Let's see if I can get the 035 to break. Oh, there we go. Same spot. Alright, so I don't have any fancy weld breaking tools, as you can see, but I did get them all to break. Every single last one of them. Well, not break. The smaller ones did not break. They actually just bent. Those welds are still holding. But yeah, let's take a look here. Alright, so the 3/8 plate with 035 and 045, trying to break the face of them, face bend. It all broke right along the toe of the weld. It just fractured the plate, which is kind of what I was expecting to happen. So the weld hold, the plate did not. It broke right along the heat affected zone, I guess you could call it. Yeah, but it held on a very, very long time. I mean, I was smacking the crap out of that thing. Whereas bending the root, the weld failed first, which is what I was expecting to happen. But again, I mean, it took some beatings. And then yeah, with the 1/8 inch plate, I mean, it held. The welds held. The plate did not. This plate, it could not impart enough force on that weld, even with the defects, to get it to break. So that's a very interesting result, I think. I was expecting the welds to break when I bent them on the root bends, but they didn't. They still held, and yeah, just bent the plate. So interesting findings. Again, the reason why I wanted to do this is a lot of people were saying that they could not get any penetration with the 035 wire, especially on the Lincoln 210 MPs specifically. And even though I didn't test that on the 210, we tested it on the Fronius. It appears as though there was no root penetration. But when it came down to it, did it really matter? Not really. Especially on the thinner stuff. The thicker stuff, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, if you were welding on both sides of that plate, it would it probably wouldn't matter whether you had root penetration or not. It would still hold, I think. I mean, I was really wailing on that stuff before I could get it to break. I think it even bent my table up a little bit there, but I'm not too worried about it. All right, so an interesting note. I'm setting up another bend test here, or another test, but I was noticing that this 3/8 plate actually bent really far before the weld gave out. And it's not the weld that gave out, it was the plate gave out right at the toe of the weld. But I mean, it bent, I'm gonna say, good like 90 degrees or so before that weld failed. So yeah, that's something pretty interesting, I think. Like, it failed, but it wasn't the weld, it was the base metal. And I mean, it pretty much bent at a 90 with no heat applied to bend it before it failed. So, I mean, I don't know what you would be doing in real life that would allow a piece of metal to bend that far to consider that a weld failure. You know, if you got a piece of metal that bends that far, probably your whole structure is compromised. So I mean, you know, that's, even though there was there was no root penetration, I mean, it still would have held what you needed it to hold. And then I noticed, I was looking at these things a bit closer. Right there in the root, I don't know that it exactly trapped any slag. It just didn't have any penetration in the root. Because I haven't found slag in there. It was all just, like, it wasn't, it's like when you weld over copper or something. Like how it just solidifies on top of the metal. That's pretty much what it did there on the root. Where's the other piece? Here it is. Yeah, this is the matching piece to that. Yeah, like it didn't trap any slag there. It just, I don't know, it just didn't penetrate. So that's interesting. But what I'm gonna do now is I'm reusing these pieces. I got some solid wire, 035 solid wire. I'm gonna weld 2 more samples with the solid wire. I'm gonna do a root bend and a face bend with that, and then maybe find a stick electrode and do a root and a face bend with that. And again, I mean, I don't have any fancy testing devices here, just the impacting hammer. The one disadvantage we're gonna have right now for this solid wire bend test is these plates are extremely cold right now. It's about like 20 degrees in here. Plus they already went through a bend test before. And they're going to have a start and stop on both plates, or on each specimen. So that'll be our face bend. That'll be our root bend. And now I'll go get a different welding process here. Alright, so the plan was I was going to get a different process. I think I'm interested to find this out. What if you just run out of gas? So I shut the gas off. Should have shut the wire off or just purged it. So we now have no more shielding gas. Still 035 solid wire. Let's find out what happens with this. So I purposely welded that wrong. You know, that represents, you know, the last ditch effort to just kind of get things accomplished, I guess. Let's see. So that'll be the face bend. So I need to set up a root bend here. Whoops. very, very porous. That is not what you want to do, but I am extremely curious to find out what happens here. So this is our face bed. And then this is our root bend. Alright, so in theory, these two are going to break right away. In theory. I welded them without shielding gas, and it's definitely not the way you want to weld. But I do want to see if they hold up to any amount of abuse. So here we go. That took 2 hammer strikes, and that plate broke. So it held up to something, and it might work in an emergency if that's like literally all you had. Face break. So that one only took 3 hits, and that broke. Now this is the solid wire root bend. So that took about six hits, and the weld failed. I did miss on 1 hit. I don't know if I counted that or not, but the weld did fail. Now we have the root bend. Interesting. Well, the weld I was testing is still holding, but the welds that were holding it to the table broke. So let's keep hitting this until it fails. There we go. Got a failure. Again, it pretty much ripped the plate right across the toe line of the weld. And failed in the parent metal. That wasn't really what I was expecting there. So let's analyze this. Alright, so this I knew was going to fail. I mean, I welded without shielding gas. It held for a little, and then it failed. So, I mean, if it was like a last-ditch effort, you know, you might be able to get somewhere was something, if you absolutely had to do this, I would not recommend doing this normally. It definitely, these welds were extremely weak, but I mean, you saw it survived one hammer hit. The root bend pretty much just split that weld right down the center, from the root right to the center of the toe or the face. It looks like we had the same problem where it didn't really penetrate at all in the root, and that's kind of what I was expecting. But this held on a lot longer than I thought it would. We didn't get the extreme bend of the parent metal that we had with the dual shield, but it did bend a lot. And I mean, even though this is solid wire MIG and there's probably not any root penetration, if you were welding correctly if your engineering was correct, then this it would still probably hold up for a very long time, as long as you wet your toes in and you don't have any cold lap. Like if your engineering was correct, you could use short circuit MIG, I believe, and your structure would probably still work. You can see it started to fail right in the heat affected zone, right along the toe of the weld, and then it did kind of rip apart the parent metal more than the weld zone itself. So interesting finds there. So I don't know. The reason why I started to do this video is because, like I said, there's a lot of talk about 035 dual shield not penetrating into the root, and I kind of wanted to investigate that theory. It does seem to hold true, but do you need that root penetration when it pretty much grabs onto the weld legs, I guess you would call them? Like that weld just grabs onto the metal and doesn't let go, whereas these a solid wire, it failed a lot quicker. Yeah, so I don't know what to say, but it was fairly interesting. I do wish I had some more metal to test some more stuff on, and I wish I would have made sure I had navel jelly before doing this test. So I don't know. I'm not a science lab here. This is just some basic findings, I'm gonna get back to work and get some more of these ramps built.